All right, so thank you very much, Dr. Kessner, for meeting with me and agreeing to talk. I'm very excited to hear some of your stories. You were born in 1943, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so you were like towards the tail end of World War II, but
That's
too
correct.
young to remember a lot of it.
I don't remember anything about World War II except what I've read about it.
Okay. What was it like growing up after World War II? I'm sure your parents had stories. Do you have older siblings?
No, I was the oldest. I have one younger brother.
Okay.
It was very delightful. We lived in the city of Chester in an area called Sun Hill. Sun Hill was about 3 blocks by 3 blocks. In that small area were 7 immediately related families. Aunts, uncles, grandparents, great aunts, great uncles. It was amazing that that existed at that time.
Yeah.
Every block you went, there was a relative. So you could get in trouble very easily, and everybody knew about it.
Yeah.
But there was always lunch, and there was always a bathroom. And it was on the edge of a woods, which was great to play in, and the woods led to a creek, which made it even more fun.
Were there boys your age?
Lots.
Okay.
Lots. This was a post-World War II enclave with a lot of children in it.
Yeah.
Some went to Catholic school and some went to public school. We called them the publics, they called us the Catholics.
Okay.
But we always had off the day after Halloween, and they didn't.
Oh, you were the lucky ones.
We were the lucky ones.
So around like the 1950s when you were growing up, there were a lot of TV shows that came out, like Leave It to Beaver and Pleasantville, that kind of made this idealistic type of America. Was your childhood like that?
Yes, very much so. The TV shows I remember were Rin Tin Tin, came on Friday nights at 7:30. That was followed by Mama, which came on at 8 o'clock. Lassie came on Sundays around 7. Leave It to Beaver, I forget what night he was on. Also on television was boxing was on 3 nights a week.
Oh, like the sport boxing?
Yeah, this kind of boxing. 3 nights a week. There were westerns, there were some comedy shows. I forget some of the exact titles, but Leave It to Beaver was one. All in the Family, I think, was one. Jackie Gleason was a big show on Saturday nights.
Oh, okay.
Very popular variety show. Jackie Gleason himself would take several parts, completely different during the show, like Joe the Bartender and The Honeymooners with Art Carney. That was very popular. My aunt, my mother's sister, never missed it.
Yeah, well, what else did you guys do for fun? I mean, there were the TV shows, you're out in the woods getting into trouble.
We didn't watch TV a lot. It was a close-knit neighborhood with some open fields, so we would have pickup baseball games. There was probably a basketball hoop within walking distance. When it snowed, we had great times sledding. There were fields at that time where people actually had victory gardens from World War II. Have you heard of victory gardens?
No.
The people would plant vegetables in open spaces and raise vegetables so they didn't have to buy them. And where I lived, I can think of 3 places within 2 blocks where different families had victory gardens growing vegetables.
When you were growing up, that's when Cold War tensions really picked up. And we hear a lot about that like in the 50s and then calmed down in the 60s. But were you in school? Did they ever prep you for like a nuclear war?
Well, we had some drills where we were instructed to get under our desks in case there were rockets or bombs falling near us. I don't think getting under the desk would have been a lot of protection.
Yeah.
But we did it. And then later, my folks moved from the city of Chester out toward Media, Pennsylvania in Delaware County. And this would have been around 1960, 61, 62. Some people were actually building bomb shelters in their backyards.
Really?
And I knew some of our neighbors built a bomb shelter in their backyard.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. That's right.
Did you really think like nuclear war was possible?
I didn't, but they did. We didn't have a bomb shelter. I'm not sure the bomb shelter would have done them a lot of
Yeah.
good either, but they did, and it was a time of high tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union.
Yeah. Did that scare you as a kid?
I think I had other things to be concerned about growing up, school, girls, normal things.
Very important things, yeah.
I wasn't thinking about nuclear war.
Did the adults around you talk like to kids about the tensions with Russia or any of that possibility? Did they leave that out so you guys didn't have to worry about it?
They didn't. I don't remember the relatives I was closest to talking about it to us. I don't even remember them talking about it among themselves very much.
Mm-hmm.
We heard about it in school. I finished 8th grade in 1956, and we had Sisters of St. Joseph who were very anti-communist and would just drill this into us.
Yeah.
How bad places like the Soviet Union and China were, who were communist. And then I was in high school from 56 to 60. And, in history class we would talk about a little bit, but not that much. One very important thing happened in 1957. Are you familiar with the term Sputnik?
Yeah.
That's when the Russians launched the first satellite that actually circled the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And you could actually, some clear nights, see it.
Really?
Yes, you could actually see it. And being the first satellite put into space, it really greatly concerned the United States government that Russia was way ahead of us in terms of science and technology and rocketry and space things.
Yeah.
In response to that, the United States Congress passed something called the National Defense Student Loan Act, which set up low interest loans for students going to college in science, engineering, mathematics,
Mm-hmm.
fields like that. And that program allowed me to borrow money to go to St. Joe's.
Oh, really?
Really? That's where all the tuition came from.
What did you study in college?
What did I study?
Mm-hmm.
I studied chemistry.
Oh, cool.
And it was a very rigid curriculum. We knew exactly everything we had every semester when we started.
Okay.
We had to take a language, and it had to be German.
Oh, did they tell you why it was German?
Nope. At that
Oh.
time, you didn't ask the Jesuits any questions because you wouldn't get any decent answers.
So, but you still ended up going to med school.
Yeah, I took general biology at Temple between third and fourth year of college.
While you were in college, that was when the Cuban Missile Crisis happened, right?
It was 1962.
Okay. Do you remember anything about that?
Oh yeah, the people were very frightened. I mean, I think the government was frightened. John Kennedy was president. His ambassador to the United Nations was Adlai Stevenson. And Adlai Stevenson made a presentation in the United Nations showing very detailed pictures of missile silos in Cuba and ships bringing missiles to Cuba from Russia. Khrushchev was the premier of Soviet Union. And for a week or 10 days, it was really quite tense. The military wanted to invade Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, very aggressively so, or at least bomb Cuba.
Yeah.
And some cooler heads in the Kennedy administration prevailed. And some people like Ted Sorensen and Bobby Kennedy and 2 or 3 others made overtures to Khrushchev and the Soviet Union and gradually really defused what was a legitimate crisis.
Yeah.
I mean, I had teachers in college that thought we were going to invade Cuba.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
Speaking of President Kennedy, what did you think of the Kennedy administration?
He was young. He was very young. He was taken advantage of by Khrushchev early on. He matured. He handled the Cuban Missile Crisis very well. He handled the situation in Berlin, which was a divided city at the time, relatively well. He was assassinated in November of 1963, so he really didn't have a whole term as president. But I think the term he had was looked upon favorably. He's the president who's created the NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and said, we'll send a man to the moon and bring him back safely.
I mean, for the time, that was a really big
It
accomplishment.
was a huge accomplishment. There's more computing power in that phone, a lot more, than they had to use when they sent the astronauts to the moon and back. They were using slide rules for computations back then.
That's crazy.
It's true.
You remember the moon landing? Was that 1969?
July of 1969, the 20th or 21st. Fascinating.
Really?
Fascinating. I remember being up in an apartment in Philadelphia watching it in real time at night. It was one of the most exciting events of my lifetime.
Wow.
It was great.
Back to JFK. Do you remember like the day he was assassinated?
Very well. I was in the chemistry lab, and like noon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, somebody had a radio on and they said the president's been shot. And then everybody kind of stopped doing what they were doing and went to the televisions or radios to watch. A good friend of mine who was up in one of the other labs with me took all this in, and we didn't feel like working. And there was a bar across the street called the Main Liner across City Line Avenue, and Jerry and I went over there and ate hard-boiled eggs and drank beer for a while.
They caught the guy they thought shot him, and then somebody came and killed him.
That was Jack Ruby.
Okay.
And that was on live television.
Really?
They were taking the suspect, they were transferring him from either part of a prison to another part or from one prison to another prison. Jack Ruby stepped out of the crowd with a handgun and shot him on live television.
Wow. Oh, Lee Harvey Oswald. That's who it was.
That's all.
Did you see that?
Yeah. Back then, everybody was watching television all the time because of the huge events surrounding the assassination of a president. That didn't happen very often.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Do you agree with what the government said happened, that Lee Harvey Oswald shot him, or do you have a conspiracy theory that you
I
think?
agree with what they said.
Yeah.
They had a very high-powered commission that looked into that. I think it was headed by Earl Warren. The Warren Commission, he was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And that's what they said. They had a lot of smart people on there. I do not believe any of the conspiracy theories.
After JFK was Lyndon B. Johnson.
Correct.
And he was very big in the civil rights movement.
He became so. He wasn't originally. Remember, he was a Texan. He was a segregationist back in the day. President Kennedy wanted to advance civil rights, but he didn't put the full thrust of his administration behind it. When Lyndon Johnson succeeded him, he did, and he deserves a lot of credit for that.
Yeah.
He really got the civil rights bill passed.
Civil rights movement, that was when you were in college and a young man. What was your reaction to that? Did you go to any of the protests? Did you see the protests?
I didn't go to any protests. I thought it was the right thing. You know, these people deserved equal rights. I thought the way they were being treated in the South by the police and other authorities was wrong. being in college and then medical school in the 60s, didn't have a lot of time to go to protests.
Yeah.
I just didn't. I remember when Martin Luther King was shot and killed.
Mm-hmm.
That was February, March, April of 68.
Mm-hmm.
And then Robert Kennedy was killed in June of 68. 1968 was a terrible year for this country. The Tet Offensive occurred in Vietnam, those two assassinations, lots of protests against the war and for civil rights. There have been magazines devoted just to the year 1968.
So you entered Vietnam in 1969 after you were in med school?
After I finished medical school and after I finished 1 year of internship.
Okay.
I did, between the end of July and the end of October, I had been to 2 Army schools.
Mm-hmm.
One was called the Basic Army Officers Course, which all the new docs going in the Army had to do. Then I did another 7-week program to become a flight surgeon.
So flight surgeon, was that, can you explain that? I've never heard of that.
Sure. That's a term used for physicians who were assigned to take care of air crew.
Okay.
Pilots, co-pilots, crew chiefs, and anybody associated with aviation and their family usually had a flight surgeon to help take care of them.
Were you drafted into the war?
It's a complicated question. I don't know how much time you have. Back in the 60s, the draft was very active. And all through college and all through medical school, we were deferred from the draft. But after internship, you had to finish your internship. After that, you were subject to active duty. We had 3 choices. We could go right on active duty after internship, which I did. We could go on active duty after internship plus 1 year, or we could apply for what was called a lottery to finish your specialty training. For example, orthopedic surgery or neurosurgery or internal medicine.
Mm-hmm.
You had to go into a lottery. You're not guaranteed that. If you were picked in the lottery, you were guaranteed to finish your training. If you did not win the lottery and you chose to start your specialty training, you could be drafted out of that at any time, depending on the military's needs. So it just made the most sense to me to go in after internship and get it over with.
So you're in Vietnam and you were shipped out there. Can you describe what that was like?
I had orders for a specific flight from the Air Force Base in Oakland, California. Mm-hmm. And I went to visit some people I knew from Philadelphia General, and I missed my flight.
Oh my gosh.
I missed my flight. I got there too late. And the person at the operations center said, "It's okay, Captain. There'll be another one tomorrow morning." And there was. So we went from California to Hawaii to Okinawa to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
We landed at night. It was very hot, very humid. People walking around carrying guns. A little unnerving. And then we were sent to a replacement unit, and from there sent to our final assignment in country after a couple steps. And I got assigned to this unit. It was a assault helicopter unit in the middle of the country, and it was attached to a South Korean infantry division. So there was South Korean soldiers in Vietnam fighting for us. Mm-hmm. And the unit I was with provided their air support.
Were you very scared? Did that not hit you, how dangerous it was?
I mean, it was always a little dangerous, but if you were scared all the time, you'd be ineffective. So you just kind of went about and did what you needed to do. Being at this Korean base, our security was very good. It was provided by the South Korean soldiers, who were very good soldiers, very disciplined. And we had our aviation unit there. The bad guys would try and get us occasionally, but they couldn't really get close enough. to do much damage.
That's good.
Oh, very good.
Yeah. Did you interact with any of the Vietnamese citizens a lot?
Sure.
Yeah? What?
Regularly.
Okay. Were they like welcoming? Do they tend to stay away from American troops?
There was a town very close to our base called Ninh Hoa, Ninhhoa. And we would go down there and meet with their public health people. There was an orphanage nearby. We would try to help the sisters that ran the orphanage and the kids. I think the relationship between our unit and the people in Ninh Hoa was very good. We didn't know if any of them were Viet Cong or if they were sympathetic to the North Vietnam situation. We just didn't know. They could have been.
Really?
But on the surface, they were friendly. On Fridays, sometimes we would go out and visit nearby communities and try and provide some medical support to these villages. And sometimes we would go by helicopter, and sometimes by boat, because they were often the islands, and rarely by jeep or truck, just for safety reasons. That was very interesting. We were always very welcome there.
Did you feel like you were winning the war, that it was like a sort of a stalemate at the time, that the Americans were losing?
I don't think I even thought about it that much. My role was to take care of any Americans in the area, whether they were flight crews or civilians, and there were civilian American people there, or people just passing through. It didn't seem like we were losing. It didn't seem like we were winning. It seemed more of a stalemate, I guess.
How long were you in Vietnam?
1 year.
1 year. Okay.
Yes.
So you were in and out semi-quickly?
Well, if you consider a year quickly. Yeah, I was the only doctor in a small dispensary. We had about 10 medics. We took care of anything that came in. If it was serious, we could put them on a helicopter and take them to a hospital. The time seemed to go quickly. I got a lot of mail from home, and different ladies would write me and send me brownies and things like that. I got a couple newspapers that would come in maybe 10 days after they were published, and Time magazine.
Okay.
The medics were sincere and they were helpful.
I'm sure you were glad to go home after the year.
I was, but actually, when my time came to go home, I didn't go straight home. I asked for some leave time to spend in Japan, which was called a delay en route home. So I actually spent 10, 12 days in Japan after leaving Vietnam before getting to the United States.
Wow, that's cool. Just, you wanted to see Japan?
I was that close. Why not?
Yeah.
It was a great opportunity. But in June of 70, I got some R&R to Sydney, Australia.
Okay.
And in late September, early October, got some time to spend in Hong Kong. So it was
That's really nice.
broken up. I was very fortunate that way.
Yeah.
I was healthy. I didn't get injured. I didn't get sick.
You were very lucky.
I agree.
When you came home, were there a lot of protests for the soldiers?
Not that I remember. I read about them. I certainly didn't experience any ill will or threats or disrespect or anything. But I kept a low profile. One thing that we didn't notice was any really welcome home. Thanks for what you did. We love you.
Yeah, like they did for the World War II soldiers.
Yeah, what I remember was getting off the plane from Japan. When I left Japan, we went to Alaska, down to Oakland, and went over to San Francisco and caught a flight to Philadelphia. And when I went into the operations office in Oakland, the Air Force Base, there was just a guy there saying, "Welcome home." Okay.
A little
No big
underwhelming.
deal.
Yeah. Huh.
No big deal.
So when you came back That's after Richard Nixon was elected president. So what were your thoughts on him? Do you think his policies were good? I know he was very into international relations, trying to bring the Cold War tensions down.
He was an effective internationalist. And sometime in the early 70s is when he sent Kissinger, who was either Secretary of State or National Security Advisor, to China. And the United States and China didn't have any ongoing relationships. So as an internationalist, he was very successful, I think.
Do you remember Watergate or where you were when you heard about that?
I remember Watergate very well. It was tragic. Nixon was well on his way to re-election. He would have been re-elected. And either he or one of his aides had this small group to try and break into the Democratic National Headquarters in the Watergate apartments. And they were caught. And it took months for actually all the information to come out. And then they found out that Nixon had these tapes that nobody knew about, but somebody mentioned he would tape a lot of his conversations in the Oval Office. And then there was at least one, maybe more than one committee, Senate Select Committee on Watergate, and they were chaired by very competent people. And again, over months, all this information came out. A special prosecutor was fired. Special prosecutor was appointed. Forget his name. A Boston guy. And he was digging deep into the Watergate thing, and Nixon fired him. And then Nixon named a successor to replace him, and he resigned. He wouldn't do it. And then finally, I think the person who was Solicitor General agreed to take the place. That was called the Saturday Night Massacre that happened in October. It must have been October of '72. There was no need for the Watergate operation whatsoever.
So in between like 60s and 70s, outside of politics, there was a big like counterculture movement, like hippies. Do you remember anything about that? What was your opinion?
Yeah, it was the late 60s and early 70s. They basically wanted to protest against the war. They didn't want any authority telling them what to do. They wanted to live in communes. I guess the only effect they had was drawing attention to themselves as a little bit out of mainstream.
Yeah. Okay. So you weren't involved in any of that?
No.
No.
No, I was either an intern, I was either in medical school, an intern, or in the Army.
Okay.
I didn't have much opportunity to pursue
be a
that.
hippie. Yeah.
There was a very famous concert in August of '69.
Woodstock?
Woodstock, yeah, where they had like 300,000 people on this farm in New York, and it rained. And it became a big mess. There was a lot of well-known singers and entertainers there, and a lot of this fringe hippie elements, and then there were a lot of people just interested in the music, I think.
Okay, cool.
But that lasted several days.
Yeah.
I was down at Fort Sam Houston, Texas when that happened. I was in the Army.
Speaking of music, did you like the Beatles?
I did.
Yeah.
Yes.
My dad likes them too,
I
and my
like the
grandfather
Beatles.
liked them too.
I like the Beatles, and I like Simon and Garfunkel.
Oh, okay.
Nixon resigned. He was going to be impeached. And to avoid that, he resigned. Gerald Ford was the vice president. He became president.
Okay. And what do you think of him?
A very good person. I think a solid individual. He had played football at the University of Michigan. He'd been around the block. He had been in the House of Representatives a long time. He was a good person. What hurt him at the time was when he pardoned Nixon. He gave a presidential pardon to Nixon so Nixon would not be indicted and tried for what was viewed as criminal activity. That's probably the biggest thing that cost Gerald Ford his own election, and that's when he lost to Jimmy Carter.
So Jimmy Carter was then elected. During the 70s, I know that like the economy was a little bit messy. There was the oil crisis. Like how did that affect you or your family?
I don't think it really did directly. There were very high interest rates. The oil crisis in the early 70s made it hard to get gasoline, but if you were patient or knew somebody, you could get gas. But the interest rates were like, to get a mortgage, it might be 16 or 17%. But if you had money to invest and you had a CD, you could get 12 or 15% for a CD. What really hurt Jimmy Carter was the Iran hostage situation. You know, the Shah of Iran left and the religious fanatics kind of took over, and they took people in the U.S. Embassy hostage. And they kept them for months and months. And it wasn't until Ronald Reagan was elected and defeated Jimmy Carter in '80 that they released the hostages in Iran. That hurt Jimmy Carter a lot. Jimmy Carter was probably one of the smartest presidents, but you got to be more than smart.
Yeah.
He was a good person, very religious person, very devoted to his family. But in terms of political savvy, he just didn't seem to have it enough.
So after Carter was Ronald Reagan, like you said, he stopped the hostage crisis, he fixed the economy, and then did a lot of things to end the Cold War.
He was an internationalist, especially developed a good relationship with Gorbachev, who was president or premier of the Soviet Union at the time. I don't remember very much about Reagan's domestic policies. I just don't. Internationally, he was good. He was a very good communicator. He had a very good voice. He could really talk to people at their level and communicate what he thought was important. And he was a solid American citizen who, not like some of the Republicans today.
Yeah.
Reagan was a good person.
Is there anything that you felt strongly about when you were younger that over time now your opinions have changed?
Yes. When I first was able to vote, I registered as a Republican, and the first person I voted for was Goldwater, who ran in '64 against Lyndon Johnson. He was a very conservative individual. My thinking has radically changed from my Republican roots, and now I'm registered independent, but I haven't seen hardly any Republican lately I think I could vote for.
Yeah.
They're just so nuts.
Is there anything that you would want to tell your grandkids or other young people or wish they understood now in this day and age?
No, the only thing I really tell them is whatever they do, do their best. Be good, don't get in trouble. Don't take unnecessary risks or chances. Have fun. but to do their best in school or baseball or whatever it is they're doing, just to do their best. But other than that, no, they'll figure things out.